Welcome back to Business Week here on Arise News. To get into some of this week's top business headlines and other topics with me is Andrew S. Nevin, who is Chief Economist and Financial Services Leader at PwC Nigeria and is one of the preeminent voices on the Nigerian economy in the context of the global economy. Thank you for joining me, Andrew. Good to be speaking to you virtually. I guess my first question is really around what's happening in the UK market. 55 billion pounds worth of tax cuts introduced by Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor. What do you make of that, and where is this economy heading?
Well, I think, and I've lived in the UK at least 3 times in my life, so I think that the structural issues that have been building up for decades are really all coming together to create issues, and it was compounded by Brexit. So Brexit, it'll reduce the economy by at least 4%. But for a number of years, decades, they've been deindustrializing, focusing on financial services, focusing on real estate, on services that to serve kind of wealthy people around the world. And there's a book out there called Butler to the World. And none of this structurally really adds enough value. And they've kind of persisted on this real estate bubble over the last decade or two as well. And all of this now is coming to a head. And of course, with Brexit, they've lost a lot of labor. COVID has caused many people to leave the workforce. So even though there's a low unemployment rate, there's still, the GDP is not recovered. The only G7 country where it's not recovered. So all of these things are coming at the same time. And unfortunately, many economic strategies on that is largely self-inflicted by the conservative governments over the last decade or so.
Yeah, interesting point you make about the conservative government, because there's been quite a lot of policy changes in a very short space of time. Do you think this is going to have a major long-term effect, seeing as debt is rising, inflation is up, unemployment is up, and now we're hearing the property market is going through its own headwinds? What is the long-term prognosis for the UK economy?
Well, I have to say I'm pretty pessimistic on it. I mean, many institutions in the world, you need, if you're going to fix your problems, you got to focus on what are the fundamental underlying issues going on here. And if we go back say 160 years. I mean, I believe Liverpool was the wealthiest city in the world. You had this northern northern UK powerhouse of an economy during the industrializing era, and of course that's what led them to be the empire they were around the world, supported by the Navy and many colonies that they had, India, Nigeria included on that. But what's happened in the last few decades is with the Thatcher era, deindustrialization, movement to London, focus on financial services. And while that created a bubble economy in London and attracted wealthy people from around the world, it did little for marginal communities in other parts in Wales, in Northern England, in Scotland, for example. And I think now we're seeing, after a decade of neglect and austerity, this coming to a fore. But one point I want to raise that's really interesting is there's now a recognition that, in fact, the health of your population has an impact on your economic success. So there's been some recent studies in the UK that say, actually, if we kind of stand back from this, we have an an aging population, so it's harder to stay healthy and productive. We've had COVID, which has caused many people to leave the workforce, both for health reasons, long COVID, but also just because they said, why am I doing this anymore? We've had mental health challenges around the world, including in the UK, particularly young people. And I think they're now recognizing if you have an unhealthy population, you're not going to have a healthy economy. But what they haven't then done is translate that into policy, because the policy implications of that would come out and say, well, if we're going to be a successful economy, again, we need a healthy population. So let's focus around physical health, obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, particularly habits among young people to make sure they're healthy their whole life. And also let's focus on mental well-being, because without that, you're not going to be productive as well. But the policies that came out of this week's budget from the UK, from the Chancellor, don't address those issues at all, really, in my view.
Yeah, I mean, quite a laundry list there. Certainly don't envy the Chancellor and new Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. Now, from the UK to Nigeria, PwC recently published a white paper on Nigeria, the state that refuses to fail. In light of what we're seeing with the local currency FX challenges, inflation, what is the main message in this white paper?
Well, I mean, people have told a negative narrative about Nigeria, and one of the reasons this group of people came together to write this book is just to self-organizing Nigeria, to say, actually, in fact, there are many positive stories, there's many positive things that go on in this country. There's many individuals and communities that come together to solve difficult problems in that, and the book highlights that. that success on that. And we wanted to change the narrative, but we also want the country to think more about the power of self-organizing, because I think in many countries around the world, including Nigeria, sometimes the policies from the top-down policies from the federal government of Nigeria, for example, are too complex and don't think about what people at the local level are actually able to accomplish. So, one way we express it is more is less. If we try to do, or less is more, if we try to do less policy development at the federal level, we may find that the actual economy and society addresses a lot of the issues that we all kind of understand face us. But the book outlines many individual stories and incredible things that individuals have done in this country in the face of the daunting challenges that we all face.
Yeah, and Andrew, I have to ask you to take a position on this. Really, can you point to one or two or three of those silver linings in the economic cloud we currently see, since you've mentioned that the outlook potentially is positive, despite what is going on?
Yeah, it's a very good question. So we've just updated, those who've seen me talk, give an economics talk perhaps with the company know that pre-COVID we had the 10 economic themes about Nigeria. We've divided this now increased it to 17 economic themes, but we've divided it up into barriers, but into opportunities. And there's actually more opportunities than barriers, which is good news. But let me just name three of those that really give me confidence in the future. I continue to be optimistic about Nigeria in the medium term, despite all the challenges we have. Number one, state-led development. So, I mean, it really, when you dig down to what some of the individual states are doing, you really see over the last 5 or 7 years, so many governors realize it's up to them to drive the economic development. Things have to happen at the local level. You have His Excellency Governor Obaseki, His Excellency Governor El Rufai, two examples, particularly the challenges that are facing Kaduna from a security viewpoint. I think the state governors are doing an excellent job, and I think you're seeing the electoral process produce more and more state governors that are doing the right thing for their state. The second one I'm going to highlight is the diaspora. We wrote the paper pre-COVID again that just said, look, this is the largest economic force in the country, continues to gain momentum, but so many of the diaspora are now contributing back to Nigeria, not just in terms of the remittances, which have a bigger impact than any oil. Well, we have no oil revenue when the production is so low effectively, but also in influencing the way things are developing here. So some of them are running businesses. An example I'll give you is Falake Owaduni, who set up Emergency Response Africa, which is essentially the ambulance service in Lagos. She's lives in Canadian diaspora, Japa to Canada, but is now back running this business. There's 10 hospitals that have been set up in the last 2 years, I understand, by diaspora, including the one where His Excellency the Vice President had his operation. And I think the diaspora is not just an economic force or an investment force, they're becoming more of a political force who are driving good change in governance, better governance in the country. The third very big positive we see, and we put out another paper on this, is around global value chains. And we've always had outsourcing, we've always had software development offshore. India really started it in the 1990s. Nigeria is now really contributing to this development, but COVID has given many more opportunities. So what you're seeing is the ability to work remotely for inserting yourself into a global value chain. So you're earning FX for Nigeria, but without leaving Nigeria. And I think this really addresses the problem we're worried about with brain drain and people Japa experience. But if people can stay here and do these jobs and earn high wages, it's really transformative. So this paper said we should aim to have 2 million Nigerians inserted into global value chains. Of course, footballers and musicians are already inserted into global value chains. We see their value in that. But now we're talking about coders, call center, animation, but even things that come legal and accounting. And I'll cite the incredible heroine in Nigeria, Amal Hassan from Kano, who has the most successful domestic outsourcing company, has 1,100 employees in Kaduna and Abuja. These are university educated people, largely from the north, mainly women, earning FX in accounting, legal, software services, call center services, and earning that FX for Nigeria. And we think that that can really grow in the next few years. So those are three positives that I put out there, and I continue to be optimistic. I think the forces for positive change and are so strong in Nigeria that they can't be stopped.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew S. Nevin, for bringing that much needed balance to the economic discourse on Nigeria. It's been great chatting with you. Thank you.